The setup for the Gravit version of this last color wheel is similar to but slightly different than Illustrator. So if you're looking at the Illustrator instructions, you're getting a sense of what we're doing, but we do have to do it in a slightly different way this time. We will be starting with the circular shapes. So you will be going up to your shape primitive menu section, and unlike Illustrator, we can't just click and have a dialog box pop up for sizes, but you can just quickly draw two throwaway shapes and then resize them. You can also pay attention to the size they are when you're originally creating them, but if you need them to be exactly certain sizes, it's actually easier to type it in. So my first circle, which is in my case the bottom one, is going to be 5 inches, and so I'm going to type that in the width and height. The X and Y, just as a quick reminder, is page position. So don't worry about that. It's the width and height that we're specifically concerned with here. And then I'm going to drag it somewhere closer to the center of the page. And then I'm going to do the same kind of thing for my upper ellipse or circle. But in this case, it's going to be 1 inch by 1 inch because, again, it does need to be circular. Once I have the two shapes, I'm going to drag the smaller one until it is centered on the larger one. And the guides do help me out in terms of that, tell me when I'm in the right position. But if in doubt, select the shapes and use the align functions to make sure, and mine was a little bit off. Having it not in the right position is hugely problematic here. So if in doubt, use the align controls. Again, they pop up anytime you have more than one object selected, and I did the align center to get them in their correct position. All right, so yours should look like this, basically, sort of a little, all right, it's not BB-8, but it's closer to anything else I can think of to compare it to, but little circle on top of big circle. Once you have this, we're ready to move on to the next step, which in our case, not Illustrator, but Gravit, means we're going to select that top circle. We're going to hold down our Option or Alt and our Shift, and we're going to drag straight down because what I need is a copy of that little teeny weeny top circle also at the bottom level. So I'll have one at the top and one at the bottom. And once I have those two in position, I'm ready for my triangle. The triangle in Gravit is actually a shape primitive. In Illustrator it is not, so we do have that particular advantage. And we want to be watching our smart guides because before we draw this triangle, we're going to make sure that we are in the dead center of the larger circle. I'm going to select the large circle only, grab my triangle again, and I'm going to hover until I'm centered on that larger circle. Apparently my alignment isn't perfect still based on some of the stuff I'm seeing, but I can tell I'm on my large, correctly positioned on the large circle. Once I'm here, I'm going to hold down my Shift and my Option or Alt, and I'm going to draw a triangle that is exactly the size of that large circle, meaning I don't want to stop until the very tips of this triangle are touching the outside edge of the larger circle. Top, bottom, side, whatever, however you're doing yours needs to be in that exact position. And in my case, that's somewhere in the ballpark of 4.28 by 3.70. But it should look something along those lines. As soon as I click off of it, it looks like it disappears because it's got only a thin stroke on it at the moment, makes it not show up terribly well. So I'm going to fix that. I'm going to go into the border section and I'm going to increase the border from 1 to 2, which will make it bolder. And then I'm going to turn off the fill because ultimately I need to be able to see through the triangle shapes to have the look I want. So I need to do that. There isn't just an off like there is in Illustrator, but we have the ability, we can click on the eye, but we can also just set the fill to 0% and that does the same thing. Can't tell a huge difference here because the triangle is layered on top of gray and that's what its fill used to be, but it has technically worked correctly. Alright, so we now have all of the pieces that we need before we start our rotation. I am going to make sure that I have done that align center function again. Didn't see any shifts here, but it's important that they all be in that correct position. And now I'm going to do something that the Illustrator people can't do until later. I'm going to get rid of the circle. I don't need it anymore. it was only being used for reference purposes. Make sure you don't accidentally drag anything anywhere after this, but it served its purpose. And then I'm gonna, once that circle's gone, I'm gonna select this, starting outside the edge, dragging a big box to grab everything, and I am going to click on the group button at the upper part. The grouping is really important because if you group it, it reads all of these as a single unit and respects the center point of them. If you don't, it doesn't, and it works really, really differently. All right, so they're grouped. I have the group selected. I can tell it's grouped because I can see it on the left. I'm going to go over into my palette to the right here where I can transform. I'm going to click on that transform button to expand the options. And yours probably looks like this. It keeps the settings you use last, basically. So at the bottom, under rotation, the left-hand rotation option, not the right hand, which does different stuff, I'm going to put in 30 degrees. And at the bottom where it says copies, I'm going to put in 6. I may only need 5, actually. Let's see what I do. No, I'll try 6 copies, and if it's not right, I'll tell you what that is in a second. And then make sure that your rotation center is that red dot that shows up in the middle of that little range. And then I'm going to click on the apply button, and I should see my complete deal showing up there on screen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I do actually have one too many, so I can delete my top group. Is not necessary, so I only needed to do 5 copies. But you'll have 6 total groups, and that's great. The downside to this is you actually end up with a little bit too many of the triangles because we didn't need, triangles have 3 sides. We only have 12 shapes. 3 sides times 6 rotations means that we have 15 different versions of that on here, and so I'm going to show you how we're going to fix that part. But overall, the setup is looking correct. So I need to ungroup these guys. I'm also going to need to ungroup them to color them, so there's no downside to this particular aspect. I probably could have ungrouped them collectively, but I've done it in slow motion, so we're there. All right, so I now have the clusters of ellipses and polygons. I have 2 extra triangles just because of the way that we had to rotate this, and I just need to get rid of them. So I'm going to pick the 2 at the top because usually it's working its way from bottom to top in terms of duplicates. So, and if you see something disappear that shouldn't, you've done something, you've done one too many, or yours looks a little bit different than mine. But theoretically, when I delete mine, I shouldn't notice anything, quote, missing. And if I were to continue and delete another one, I would see a hole. So I don't. I have the correct number of triangles, I don't have any duplicates, and I have my completed shape that we're working from on this. So I would definitely want to save, and then I want you to look at the color application video to show you how you're going to go about the process of applying color to this. The basic idea being that I don't want a standard color wheel, first of all. And secondly, you can pick colors that are all clustered in for, let's say, warm colors or cool colors, or maybe your favorite colors are sort of Hawaiian shirt colors that are hot pink and bright green and something else. Well, you can absolutely do that for the color wheel, but you'll have to figure out the blends between certain colors, and they have to actually physically be possible. So at a certain point in the video in Illustrator, I show you, and the Alt or Option drag does work in this program as well. I show you how you would figure out what a blend would be. I'm going to quickly show you that here, and then for the rest of it, go to that video. So let's say, for the purposes of argument, that on my color wheel I had green and hot pink as 2 colors, and they had another color in between them. Well, they're going to make something interesting, but you got to figure out what that interesting is, and there's a way to visualize it. If you have, and this is, again, do this with extra copies of your colors, if you have them outside somewhere, you're going to take the color that you're going to put on top, and you're going to change its blending mode from normal to multiply. On the white, it isn't going to look any different, but when you drag it over and put it on top of, and of course it's still not on top, So let's do that one. Need to bring it, nope. And I'm bringing it forward. You can see it jumping its way along in the list here. When the two colors are layered together, it's actually sort of a dark purpley blue because that is the color that they sort of have in common. So if I were creating a blend of these, that would be the color I would need to mix to find as my in-between. You can, in here, unlike Illustrator, you can pick, it changed my background color, but you can use the layered colors and then use the eyedropper to help you end up in the correct color location place. And again, I was changing the page color rather than the item, but it is a shortcut and it can be helpful in that particular way. And where is, now that I mentioned that, the eyedropper? Oh, it's right there over the fill rather than over the other. So it would have allowed me to pick the blue, which is nice. And the other thing is, if you've got those two colors outside, you don't have to keep replacing the swatches to check other blends. So let's say, I'll show you what I'm getting at here. Let's say I had this one as yellow and this one as, that's more of the issue. This one was like that dark hot pink I was talking about a second ago. If I wanted to figure out what these two guys were and I already had two extras outside the circle, I could click on the circles and use the eyedropper to swap those out so that I'm not constantly having to create new copies. And because the top one, which is the one I've set to the right, is set to multiply, I'm able to see what the color blend of those two is and come up with a red. So those blended together would be red. Or I would do the same thing for this one and do the red, and so forth and so on. So anyway, that's just to show you the how. Take a look at the color application part to understand why you would need to use this particular technique to figure out the blends between certain colors.